I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We believe that decriminalizing all victimless crimes does more harm than good, not only for individuals but more importantly for the society, the societal structure, law enforcement consistency, and the very vulnerable groups they claim to defend. Victimless crimes, such as personal drug or like gambling and etc., are not as victimless as the proposition would like you to think. But the reality is, the effect for these crimes, these acts, create long-term harm for like families, communities, and even the future generations and the nations. So our stance here is clear that we want to build a world where the government, as the one who should protect their citizens, not only protect people from others, but also protect people for harming themselves that can lead into harming the society. And this is something we must take seriously, right? Before turning into my rebuttals and also arguments, here there are some key terms that we have to understand first, and proposition failed to explain it clearly. The number one is decriminalize, and the second one is the victimless crime. So decriminalization here means removing criminal penalties for certain actions and replacing them with softer acts or response approaches, like from the society, for example. And here, we believe that such a thing like rehabilitation and etc. that I've said by proposition of approach may work in theory, but not in reality. If we practice that, it only makes the situation like it often removes the only leverage the state to prevent for the further and long-term harm. And the second one is about victimless crimes. Like I've said before, that the term of victimless crime in here is misleading, where the proposition believes that it is a crime that done without any victim, by the people to escape the reality of life, or even because of their lacking in the lottery of birds. But here, what we must know is that firstly, here the victim itself is not actually victimless or have no effect for the person and society itself. We must understand that. For example, a person who uses drugs for themselves, proposition said, because no other individual is harmed rather than themselves, they wouldn't place them in like prison or like treat them as the same as other criminals. But the thing is that this person who uses drugs for himself not only make a negative effect for themselves at first, but also for the society, for their families, and etc. For example, they use their own money to buy drugs at first, but as soon as they get already addicted, as soon as they're already stuck and use it more and more, they buy more and more drugs, they become a bad person, right? Because it is something negative, and because of that, they cannot do their obligation, for example, to be the head of the family, and it turns to harming the family itself and the society, and at the end of the day, it can harm the nation itself if we do not take this seriously. Second of all, the victimless crime explanation from the proposition that say, oh, maybe it is because the people or like the criminals here is lacking of their lottery of birth, it is because of they're poor, it is because they want to take an action for themselves to run out of the reality that they have. We understand that, but still, they do harm to many people, right? They do harm society. They become a scum of the society, which is rehabilitation is not enough for them, for these kind of people to understand, and also to defer because of their action, because of their bad action for this society without their understanding it. So that's why proposition failed to make the decriminalization here as something exclusive. Next, I'll come for the rebuttal. For the arguments the proposition have stated about the first, the law is unjust and punish vulnerable people, and the second one is decriminalization leads to more effective rehabilitation. So let's move on to the first rebuttals. The proposition claim is that the current status quo of laws punish people who are already suffering, especially for maybe like the addict or like the sex workers and many more, and by making them as a criminal, it is something at the point of like double punish them, because they already suffering because of their life, but we still have to punish them because of the law. But here's the problem: at the point in which you harm your very own vulnerable actor by allowing harmful behavior to go, just let it happen, or just let it happen like unchecked, it's the point at which we consider you as one of the problems in this debate. Of course, people suffer. Of course, they are pushed to push desperation. But the response to suffer here is not normalize self-harm. It's not normalize the crime without victim, which is still a crime, right? Which is still something bad and something negative. But the suffer here is to regulate and also to prevent further damage. For example, if you saw a drowning person, would you say something like, "Oh, it's okay to be drowning," or you have to take them out? Of course, you want to help them by take them out, right? So this is the world that opposition want to build. By removing these legal boundaries and consequences, it means that they are abandoning them. And then let's move on to my second rebuttals. It is about the decriminalization leads to more effective rehabilitation. Well, shifting funds from like criminalization into the rehabilitation is better, but like what mechanism ensures people will even like seek help without the legal pressure? I mean, many addicts or like many maybe like sex workers and things, they do not willingly enter the rehabilitation unless they're forced to face the consequences, right? And by that, this cannot turn as effective as criminalize them at the first place. Because by criminalize them, they have the feeling of understanding that, oh, this is something not right, oh, this is something not to be normalized, and they can seek help from that, right? And here comes to my argument is that the exclusivity or of the criminalization is essential for build a better future and less harmed in many aspects. So panels, the reason why the exclusivity or like the criminalization is essential for build a better future and less harmed in many aspects, or like society in a whole society must remain exclusive even toward the victimless, lies in our state that I've said many times in this speech that we want to protect society as a whole, right? And as the criminal law in here is not only a tool to punish these actors, is not just a tool to make them understand that this is something wrong, but this is also some ways to preventive these actions. There's some ways to preventive these actions because by this law, people can understand that even if they do victimless crime, this is still a crime, and this is still something bad from the society, from the selves. So it cannot be normalized. No, yeah. And so that this kind of crimes, for example, like drugs, prostitution, and many more, it sometimes is framed as personal choices, right? So by this is something that people can feel like, oh, maybe it is because they're personal choices. So people started to normalize that. But because of this law, people started to realize that this is something actually wrong, and it can also make them avoiding these kind of things because it has something to do with it, like the consequences, right? And it means if we remove these sanctions, it means that the more addiction, it will be like more addiction, there will be more social degradation and prostitution and many more. So exclusivity in criminalization in societies is a way of defending its morality, and also like morality and trust in like structure. It's how we see certain things are incompatible with the kind of future we want to build. If everything is allowed just because it seems like harmless on the surface, we will lose our ability to control harm before it spreads, right? Without discriminalization, we don't just legalize acts, but we also legitimize consequences. So proud to oppose.